Hey Rachel, how you doing?
Hello, friend. I'm doing good. It is like hot. Like I'm feeling I'm feeling the heat in more ways than one. And I told you I got a Mustang recently, or did I tell you that?
You did not.
It has air conditioned seats.
Mustang Sally. Sorry, go on.
It is Mustang Rachel, friends, and has air conditioned seats, which your girl is thoroughly enjoying. Well, I get the full experience on the regular, and it's got the remote start so it can cool everything down and some shorts on. So, the air conditioned seats are giving what a time to be alive.
Well, I do not have air conditioning seats in my vehicle. Okay.
Oh.
But I did wish that I had like some sort of portable thing the other day. I have you ever done canvassing for a political candidate?
No, that's not on my resume of things yet.
So in 2020, I made phone calls. I thought this time I will talk to people because, it's not COVID time and
Hmm.
we'll be outside and I thought it would be neat. So I did that. And yeah, it was hot. It was so hot.
Yeah.
But it was so neat because it was in a neighborhood that is in my county, but I'd never been there. And, I had a partner with me, when you go to the headquarters and they sort of pair you up. So
Hmm.
we were together and both of us live in the county, but don't know this particular area. We were like, wow, this is really cool. Never knew this neighborhood was like this. And as we started, to prepare and walk around, we were both sort of thinking, like, I wonder what this neighborhood is like, what type of people live here. And
Hmm.
it just sort of made me think about how we can live near one another, but just one neighborhood over, a couple
Yeah.
neighborhoods over, could completely be a different situation for someone, or
Hmm.
could the experience could be different. So I don't know. It was neat
Very
to talk to
interesting.
folks. Yeah.
Yeah, you were doing your patriotic things. I love
My
that.
civic duty.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, but also this election means a lot to me, not only as a citizen and resident of the United States of America, but also there's some issues that are very close to home for me and my
Hmm.
family that I just can't afford to not do what I can to help folks know what the issues are
Hmm.
and have some conversations out there. But I thought it'd be cool to share that experience with you because of our guest today, who actually talks about the places you live and how that can influence your experiences. I actually wrote a book called What's Your Zip Code Story?
Wow.
You should read it if you have not. It's pretty amazing. So, should I tell you about him?
Go for it.
All right. His name is Christopher Gross. He goes by CJ, and he is a leading expert in cultural transformation, and he has a knack for creating inclusive environments and delivering actionable strategies. So he has a diverse background. He has worked in sales, nonprofits, engineering, and change management, and he's become a pretty sought after speaker and international consultant, and he's known for his engaging and thought provoking presentations. I know this firsthand because I actually went to one of his presentations. I attended a conference almost a year ago, and he was there speaking. He's the author, as I mentioned, of the book called What's Your Zip Code Story? And it's the subtitle is really cool because this is the part that I think brings it all home. It's understanding and overcoming class bias in the
Mm.
workplace. He's also a TEDx presenter, and his work has been featured in the Washington Post, Harvard Business Review, all over the place. He's pretty freaking amazing, and I'm so excited to welcome him. So I hope you are too. You ready?
I'm into it. Let's go.
All right. Hey, CJ, how are you doing?
Hey, Shawna. How are you? Hey,
Uh,
Rachel.
Good. So you're impressive.
That's just how we write our bios, so it sounds that way.
Oh,
Well,
well.
as I mentioned, I actually got to see you in action,
Yes.
and so I'm not going to let you just sort of, nah, it's just about you. Uh,
You're
but
so modest.
yeah, no, it's really good to have you. I'm a fan of what you talk about because I think people sort of get an idea when they think of DEI. And for those of you who aren't
Mm.
sure, DEI is diversity, equity, inclusion. When they hear those letters or they hear something about diversity, a lot of folks have an idea in their head what that is. And many people just immediately equate that to race. I can't say I'm surprised because the history in the United States is so wrapped around that, but you actually advocate for a different take on that. Before we dig into all that good stuff, though, I read your bio, but tell us a little bit about you, the person, not necessarily professional. What kind of
Sure.
stuff do you like? What you into?
So, someone asked me this the other day, and I was like, I have a diverse list of hobbies. I'll call them hobbies. So there's the normal going outside, taking a walk, all those different things. But I love motocross. I love riding dirt bikes. So I just like motocross bike after the age of 40, right? Like I started riding after the age of 40. And
I'm not gonna do it, but
right,
yeah.
right. It's like my friends were talking. It's like, one of them called me up and was like, "Are you having like a midlife crisis?" Because I was also got into scuba diving, kayaking. Just I didn't really get into horseback riding. I just started to expand my zip code story, which is I am a part of the book, right? So just doing things and activities and meeting with people that expand, my understanding of life. But, I would say I'm an adventure seeker. So
Yes.
skydiving, anything that gets your heart racing,
Oof. Rachel's face.
which is like,
You have kayaking, because I was telling Shawna about the kayaking trip I went on last weekend.
nice.
That
That's-
was delightful. But yeah, the jumping out of perfectly good planes.
I know, right?
No.
Well, Rachel, what's interesting, if you look at the statistics, if you're like a numbers person and you care about those things, so when I went skydiving, I did the research, and you're actually safer skydiving than you are walking across the street, like in New York or something.
Oh, I was going to say in DC, I believe that. Yes.
Yeah, New York, DC, any major city,
Yeah.
right? Like you're
Yeah.
driving in a car, it's actually statistically safer to jump out of an airplane. That's the only reason at the end of the day I was like,
I'll do it.
so
My central
yeah, so
nervous system is like, no.
it's a hard no, right? I think that would describe me the most is just, adventure, activity, and culture. I love to travel too as well. That's a big
Yeah.
part of. That's what.
Yeah. I would describe you as an adventurer as well. I prefer to learn about other people's adventures in that kind of way.
Read about them.
Oh, I read about them, watch them on the screens.
What happened
uh,
next?
Oh yeah, like wow, they're so amazing. It's good for them. Adventures for me, like I'm so risk averse. It's terrible. We'll have like friends or neighbors or even family will be like, "Hey, because we live in the DC area, let's go to MGM, let's go to the casino, whatever." And I'm like, I will watch everybody's things. Like I just. It
So the
hurts my
risk
heart.
is spending money or losing money,
That's right. That's right.
saving the $25 that you might spend on the
25. I'm
slots.
talking about here is my roll of
Five.
$10 quarters. This roll is gone. Then you can
I'm
find
done.
me at the Starbucks. Like, like that's it. No, I would love to have a little bit more adventure in that way. I mean, in other ways, I'm a risk taker in terms of the kind of stuff I do for my business and, in that way. So I'm not trying to paint myself as someone who's not gonna stick my neck out in some ways. I just, physiologically, I prefer to keep myself on the ground,
Yep.
not in the air. I'm also not in water.
Right, I was going to say
And-
out of water, out of air.
I am a
no
land
bugs.
dweller. No bugs. Wow, that's funny. That is like I can't even handle bugs at all.
Wow.
No. So tell us, because you kind of hinted at it. You said part of this is having to do with your zip code story. So now tell us what this means, zip code story.
Sure. So we've all met people and we've asked, where are you from? And as soon as they say that area, they don't necessarily say their zip code story, their zip codes, the numbers, but they
Right.
will say, I'm from this area in Chicago, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, whatever it is, in a specific area. And immediately, if you say you're from a specific area, that person creates a narrative about you, right? Whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's somewhere in the middle, based on their own experience, right? And so that's really what the zip code story is. But the the hard numbers of it is that when we did research for the book, the Census Bureau looks at a person's zip code, the numbers, where they grew up, and determines their mortality rate, their how much education they will receive, their health status over time, their involvement with the criminal justice system. There are just so many different factors. And so the zip code story is the story behind that, because we've all met people who defy where we think who we think they are based on where they live. Right. And I've done that before. If someone says, I met a woman who was, and I talk about this in the book, a woman who was from India. And this was a while back. And so, of course, when you watch a lot of movies and you see, you start to think like a lot of people are poor in India. And I started, instead of talking to her, instead of talking to her from a perspective of just learning her, I was thinking, oh, it's so sad. It's so unfortunate. Right. And then I interviewed her for my book, and it's like, come to find out, she was very well to do. And I was embarrassed. Right. I was like, oh, gosh. And so I think the zip code story is really the narrative that not just, that someone else has about you, but it is your zip code story as well, and how you perceive it. So I've heard people say, well, I've only had a public school education.
Only, right?
Only, right. Oh, I went to a state college. I went to a community college, right? So it excludes you from being great, or from being, something other than, what that person might think you are. And I think that's what I wanted to highlight. And so, kind of in a nutshell, the zip code story is really the story behind your experiences and how you grew up.
Yeah.
I love that. It's interesting. As part of, what I teach in my DEI workshops around like recruiting and hiring is to redact resumes. So to take away names, dates on schooling, as well as zip codes, because again, there's an idea that we have about somebody, in particular if they're local to you, about where they live. And I've seen it firsthand in my experience where people will be discriminatory against someone because their name sounds a certain way. They only want people with certain types of names. And then also like, oh, well, I grew up around the corner from here and I know what kind of people are in those neighborhoods, right? And so it's like, it's interesting how humans find these creative ways. This woman on TikTok said it so beautifully. She's like, we find creative ways to oppress ourselves daily. We also find creative ways to oppress each other by just looking at where you grew up or where you currently live.
But also each other, because that's kind of what you were getting at, CJ, I think. Like when you said a person will say, I only did this or had this.
Only.
I talk about that too, because, I used to be a teacher of little ones for several years. And it was interesting as I was getting ready to go through my career change. I found myself describing myself as just a teacher. I'm just a teacher.
Wow.
I'm only this. And I was like, now hold on.
Shaking lives.
Okay. But there's so much. And I joke around and I say, look, if there's going to be an apocalypse, what you need is an elementary school teacher around you or a military spouse or someone who's been a trailing spouse, because those people are the most resourceful. They can pivot and turn on a dime. They know how to navigate stressful situations when there's crises, and they usually are holding a ton of responsibility on their shoulders all while doing this. So I don't allow myself anymore to say I'm just a fill in the blank or I'm only fill in the blank. But you're right. Like sometimes we internalize what we think our zip code story should be based on what maybe others have said or what you imagine, kind of like you talked about learning about that person from India, like what media we consume or what things we consume to give us those ideas. And as we compare ourselves with others, we risk that for ourselves.
Absolutely. What we do, our brain does without our awareness or attention or many times our control, is we classify people, places, and things based on our own zip code story. So if when I was growing up, these type of people were mean to me, or people who lived on this side of the railroad track or this side of the river or whatever it was, then we tend to take that data and information in our brains without intentional awareness control builds in a hierarchy system, an algorithm that says, okay, well, if you look like this and you've gone to this school, or you are of this background, maybe of this race or whatever it is, we categorize people. And without really understanding, and once we build that narrative, is what we see now in many workspaces. We see this also in our political conversation. It's a very polarizing conversation, that if you are part of the left, the right, the left, the right, there is we automatically say that you are in this camp and you are this person, and then that person, if they're not on the same page as you, they spend, or they could spend, a lot of time, effort, and energy trying to debunk that story that you have in your head. And I think that's the reason why we do this work, is to help people just build relationships and get to know one another, to expand, their zip code story. But that brain does not want that to happen.
No,
Ooh,
those
neural
heuristics.
pathways.
Mm-hmm.
Those neural pathways are like rooted and booted. It's keeping us alive. Our immune systems are going. I mean, there's so much that the brain has to do. So it has to make these quick decisions. And then we make quick decisions about important things, however.
Right.
And that's
And I
where
think
we
that's
get tripped up.
That's right.
I
Yeah.
was moving something for my wife yesterday, and I was tired by the time I brought the U-Haul truck back. And this place had a whole bunch of U-Haul trucks, and the gentleman who was behind the counter identified being Indian, because I talked to them and we had a conversation. And so when I brought the truck back, there was an Indian gentleman who was taking some trash. He was moving something. He was in the parking lot. And I just talked to him like, I know you work here, so let me ask you this question. And as I asked him, like, am I supposed to put the dollies over here? Am I supposed to do this? The look that he was giving me,
Uh-oh.
and it was like, he didn't say anything, but his look on his face, like, come on, brother, are you kidding me? And he didn't say anything. He just walked away, and I was just like, yeah, that just happened, right? And I think we're human, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
yes. And from the DEI consultant, right? So I think,
No, but the thing you just said is key. We're human.
right.
We're human. DEI consultant or not, right? Of course, I've done things like that too, because we do sort of get these, and I don't even want to put it in the bucket of assumptions. And it is sort of these neuropathways, these grooves, and we default to a certain way. And it is embarrassing when something like that happens, but then to remember also to give ourselves a little bit of grace and make sure that you try harder next time, right?
I think that's an important part to know. And people have a hard time with that. People have a hard time feeling embarrassment, shame, guilt.
Oh, yeah.
How do we transform those feelings? Because as CJ was sharing that story, I've been on the receiving end of that multiple times, because apparently as a person of color, you are an employee in every place that you are in. So I'm, down at the Target trying to get my things. And this woman is like, hey, excuse me, I am not wearing a red shirt. I have no
I was
khakis,
just
I
going to
have no
ask you,
badge."
but were you wearing red? Because I have done that to people. Like,
You know
excuse
my-
me,
know
you
my
have a red
aesthetic.
shirt. So
I have on pink or some adjacent color, maybe a salmon, but no Target red. And I looked at this woman like, are you serious right now? And like probably the same look that the man gave CJ was like, be all the way for real. And I didn't say anything to her. I just looked at her and she was like, oh, you don't work here. No, I don't. I do not have on any of the accoutrements of somebody that works at Target. Please leave me alone. And so it reminds me of like how often folks of color, experience that.
Wait a minute, did
and
she
then-
complain about you as a bad employee to the manager?
Oh, that's between her and the guy she serves. I don't know. I don't know
Okay,
what
I'm
he's
just
doing.
about to.
So she might have,
You're employed.
but
right.
and they
She's
are like,
not even wearing red.
the lady comes in here a lot, but she does not work here. Okay. So how as a practitioner of the work that we teach, we are also parts of that work, right?
Yeah. So, CJ, how does this manifest at work? Like when people bring their zip code stories with them? to work?
Sure. I mean, it manifests as stereotyping. It manifests as unconscious bias or at times conscious bias. And the impact is being excluded from job opportunities, being excluded from succession planning, like when you're thinking about I'm not gonna say we've all heard it, but if you've been striving, if you're in middle management, you've heard that person doesn't have a certain quality, a leadership quality, or I forgot what's the word they used. This person doesn't have executive presence.
Oh,
And I
yes,
remember
another
someone
one.
said to me, they just flipped out.
Yes.
What is executive presence?
Right.
And someone said, obviously, it's not you.
Oh,
But what they were really saying was, I think that's such a gray area, but it's the reality. Like, can you see this person going in front of your clients? Can you see this person working with, your employees, your groups, and getting and swaying them, right? And unfortunately, we look at a person and how they dress. There's research that shows if you're a man and you are 6'2",
yeah.
you have
Yes.
it's very, when I give people the statistic that says that if you are 6'2", that you are most likely to be in leadership, and a lot of people will like, oh yeah. And I had this one guy say once, he's like, because it depending on how tall you are, it's like a dollar amount, it's like $400 something per year. But there's all these things that happen without our intention, awareness, or control. Like for example, you're in a board meeting, right? So I sit on 2 boards, and you can easily defer to the person who you think is the qualified person, right? And excluding what their actual experience is, right? And sometimes that could be the male. Sometimes that might be based on race, or it might be based on height. It might be based on who's the loudest, who is the
Or age.
most. Yeah. Oh, yes, the one who has the salt and pepper hair, whatever it is. And so that's how it kind of manifests, but it also then leaks down into these other, conversations in terms of career trajectory. When you experience this from a negative perspective, in the beginning of your career, it can derail your opportunities, for leadership, for management, for maybe getting in the C-suite, or even applying for a leadership position or a program.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine that. I also wonder if there's some element of stereotype threat that can be included in that. So if you've had an experience where you're passed over in some way and you start to believe like, oh, that's because they don't let fill in the blank of said identity into this space or whatever, and then you just sort of, I don't know,
You
agree with it,
own, right?
or yeah, own it.
That becomes a part of your narrative,
Yeah.
and in not such a great way. And then before you know it, it's like the next time you apply, you're already thinking that.
Yeah.
And so that, because that, unfortunately, it becomes your reality, self-fulfilling prophecy. And that happens good and bad. I've had people say, I am going to be in this position. I am going to do. And it's the people that we see on television, we see at the C-suite, especially when we look at someone who we might consider a historically marginalized individual. It's like, well, how did they get there?
Mm.
Makes you say,
Yeah.
If my narrative is true for me, being, let's say, for example, being a person of color, or let's say I'm a woman, or I'm part of the LGBTQ community, or I have a different ability. Some people call it disability, but I say I have a different ability. Whatever it is, that is my lived out narrative. I then start to kind of manifest and start bringing forward, and I don't see the opportunities I could because of the story. And that then there's brain science that actually supports that we see what we were used to seeing. Right. So if you're used to seeing, I've had people who are like for sororities or fraternities, and they see their colors all the time, or their football teams, or whatever it is. You kind of, your brain gravitates towards those things in which you're used to. And so that is the very, very unfortunate space that a lot of people find themselves in companies and organizations. And to break that narrative, it's, I wouldn't say it's hard, but it requires some personal work, some self-reflection, looking in the mirror, which sometimes we don't like to do because it's easier to have that narrative support our not achieving the things that we really want to achieve. And in my book, I talk a lot about that in my own personal life. So I'm like a model for negative stories at first, and then unraveling those stories.
Yeah. No, I can appreciate that. It's, as a coach, there's a question we ask sometimes when folks feel stuck in that space, that tape is playing, whatever that tape is. And you ask, like, so what is it about that message that is serving you? What do you love about that? And that's kind of a jarring question because the person at first is like, I don't love it at all. And you're like, really? Because you seem to kind of be
That's the question
playing
people get mad about, right? They're like, what do you mean? Why am I paying you for this?
a little bit. I'm like, but I mean, it seems to be an old hit. You just keep playing that tape over and over. So there's got to be something there that you love about it. What's going on? And then it does. It holds up that mirror, which you said. It's hard. It's hard. But I wanted you to speak on that a little bit because I know it can show up differently in the workplace as people either are able to turn off that tape, never let that tape play in the first place, or if they do continue to let that play. And it's, to be fair, there are some things that are external that are beyond our control, but then we can still make choices to try to navigate those situations.
I'll share a quick story. When I was going through school was very challenging, all those things, right? And my narrative, anything that happened, it was like, I can't do it because I'm dyslexic.
Mm-hmm.
Right across the street, can't do it. I'm dyslexic. It was really sad, right? And then, I mean, I had several people kind of debunk that by telling me their story. And before I knew it, this person, they have their doctorate and did all these amazing things. And then they look over at me and they're like, well, yeah, it was hard going to school because I'm dyslexic. I was like, no. If I was honest, I didn't want them because now that means that I'm just underachieving. That just means that I'm underachieving, right? And so when I was in school, the narrative wasn't just that I was dyslexic, it's just that I wasn't smart. And so what happened was I wanted to graduate undergrad with a 3.8, 3.9 GPA. Because in my mind, my story was if I do that, no one told me that was the case, but if I do, that meant that I would be smart. And that meant, I don't know what else it meant, but that I would be smart. So every time I would get close to, not getting the grade I want, I would stop school. And because of that, so we're talking about the trickle down effect of the story. Because of that, it took me 6 years to complete my degree because I kept stopping because I didn't think I was going to get the GPA that I wanted.
The metric that you created.
They don't care. That's when you get older. They're like, can you do the work?
Right. Although I do have one professor who we're still in touch, and every once in a while I'm like, you don't want to give me a B. But like, I had a 4.0 homie, and he's like, oh my God, Shawna. And I'm like, no. But does anyone ask? No, nobody asks. You're right. It's about what skills you have. What do you bring into the table?
Do you have a degree?
The overachiever in me is like, but also that 4.0.
Years later, you're sitting.
I'm just saying. Every time
that would have made me upset. That 1B though. I'm not gonna lie. I would have been.
It did.
I might want to go back and kick that one out.
We had a conversation, and he was like, "Literally, Shawna." I'm like, "No, literally," because it looks so nice on my little transcript, and then there it is. Anyway, that's
then you could drop it. You could drop it anytime you want. It's like, when I was in school, I had 4.0. We do. I mean, we all do that, especially in professional environments. We drop stuff just to let people know. I'm at that level. I've done some work, especially in academia, right? So anyway.
Well, I considered myself a scholar practitioner, so I do not subscribe to the whole academia thing, even though I'm quite the academic nerd, forever researching, writing, and doing all the stuff. But I guess we do drop our little whatevers that make us feel, because we know what makes us feel like we've achieved something, right?
And also people need the receipts. I'm sorry, but people need receipts. Because sometimes people try to play in your face and act like you did. Like, I actually have a master's degree with a 4.0 friend. Like, do not try to play in my face right now. Do not let any of these, the tattoos and none of this fool you, friend. I am actually a quite intelligent person.
Well, so there, you bring up something important. I mean, sometimes they do need the receipts because of those heuristics, whatever it is they're holding on to, that is that definition of what is executive presence, what is professionalism. I actually talk about that quite a bit or whatever, because there's some idea. We don't have time today to start talking about the Crown Act and all of that, which for those of you, I'll put something in the show notes so you can look into it. But it's this idea of how our natural hair used to be a barrier. And I don't know, I don't want to quote the wrong number, so I will put the link in the show notes, but I think it's up to 22 states that have adopted the Crown Act officially. So you cannot be discriminated against because of your hairstyle, whether it's cornrows, locks. Like, why would we penalize somebody for just the way they are? And then the lifestyle choices they make and the aesthetic that they want to have, whether it's tattoos or pink hair, I don't care. But there's this idea of professionalism. So I'm glad you brought it up. So maybe you do need to kind of drop a little something, something, so they know, look, this is what I got, and this is what I'm bringing, and what's important to you, actually, that this gets done, right? Or that this is achieved, and I've got what it takes to do the thing.
One of the things I will say is what we've done in our business, and we've encouraged our clients to do, is to socialize norm of talking about biases, which is so politically incorrect. So you're speaking of hair color. We hire interns, and that's where all my biases come out. And so
hair color?
It doesn't matter. I got lots of biases for these interns. Oh. And then there's one lady, she had like all green hair. Like, it looked really cool, but I was like, what was the client thing? And the first thing we did when we got off the call, we don't talk about what we liked about the person or the interviewee. We say, what was your bias? And I'm like, you know what my bias, that's what we do. We do it in a way, and the reason why we do that is we're saying, I'm acknowledging it, number one, and please challenge me. And we socialize to say we could talk about that. I might not have been able to mitigate it, right? And if I didn't mitigate it, maybe we wouldn't have hired her. I would have made up a story in my head that this other person is better or whatever it is, and not give that person an opportunity.
Amazing.
All of that. Are we allowed to use that, Mr. Gross? Because that whole what was your bias is amazing.
Yeah, let's go.
That's such a great idea. Just get it out right now.
But what happens when it's like really and you're in a group? The problem is when someone says it and they've had no training, there's lack of empathy. There's just
got you.
Yeah, culturally a hot mess.
Can be, and I hear you. That's quite an important caveat, that the training is necessary to know how to have those conversations. But it's neat. I haven't heard that before. Just getting that right on out at the beginning. I do want to ask you, kind of shifting gears. I know that in your book, and also in the conversation that took place when I was able to attend your session last year, the concept of being a class migrant. So and I don't know if this is true for this intern, this is what made me think of it, because you said that this person went on to be successful, not having any idea what their zip code story is, but thinking of others who might come from a situation where their story is they don't know what to expect when they do sort of, and I'm doing air quotes here, move on, moving on up. So like when they move, what happens? How do you handle something like that when you're like, great, I'm in this position, this situation now, but I've never been in a situation like this before.
Sure.
What can you say about that?
Well, I think so. Just to identify a class migrant, a person who migrates from one class to another, a person that grows up in one socioeconomic class and moves to another one in their lifetime. So, for example, both of my parents were what we might call working class or blue collar, didn't have a degree, but worked for the federal government, had good jobs, but they didn't go to college. And so when I went to college, the rules were not talked about at the dinner table. The rules were not talked about as I did my homework. They talked about what I wanted to do after school. It wasn't assumed that I was going to go to college. It was just like, you need to do something. So the rules were never taught to me. I knew the rules that I grew up in, but then when I got to corporate America, the rules were different.
Okay, tell us what you mean by rules.
Sure. So, okay. So what came to mind was golf. Okay. Because I started golfing recently, like in the last couple of years, and there's something called like not walking across someone's line when you're about to putt on the green. And I don't even know if this all makes sense, because if you don't play golf, you're like, what does that mean?
Well, I'm catching that there's etiquette.
There's etiquette. And I think that's the thing. And so when you walk across someone's line, it puts an indent into the green, and it may make the ball go one way or the other. But it's not that they say it. They just don't say you're walking across my line. They make a mental note. You might not get an invitation to play, or if you are in a situation where, and I'll come back to the workplace, but this came to mind because we've had someone when I first started learning to play golf. I've had one of the managers of the golf association to come and to say, hey, we have some complaints about you. I thought he was coming to say, hey, do you want any food or something, right? Because they bring you food. He said, and we were, my friend and myself, we were the only two people of color. So automatically that story starts to go off. It's like, wait a minute. Yeah. And I was like, you came all the way out here to tell us that, we broke the rule. And it's an unspoken rule that it's called play through. When someone's behind you, you're supposed to let them play through, especially if they're faster than you or if they know the rules. No one teaches you that when you get the golf clubs. They just send you out there. They don't tell you anything. And I think they don't tell you that. And so when you look at in the workplace, right, for example, when I was, doing work that would be considered as, working class, right, there's a certain dialogue that you use, right? There's certain, like in certain community, there's certain handshakes that we do. Right. And even the basic thing is the nod. I'm just going to give you one example. This is a really good one because I paid attention to it. When you are walking in a community, like I'll say in a African-American community, that's what I'm doing because I identify with being African-American. The nod looks like this. The nod is up. And it's up. And that means, what's up?
Yep.
All right. But when you're in the workplace, the nod is down. And it means, hello, how are you?
I'm totally I'm like, I know these.
Yeah. And so unconsciously, right, but when you code switch, we don't have time to go in, right? When you are switching, you do it automatically, right? Yeah. And here's the thing. On a subconscious level, our brains pick up whether because if you know the nod, up or down, then you know the rules, or at least we think you know the rules. And then you can start to... I shouldn't say infiltrate, but you can now be accepted.
You assimilate in a way.
And so when I grew up right outside of Washington, D.C., and I was not in Washington, D.C. And for the longest time, I didn't go in because I was from the camp. And so I remember going in and I was like, you have to learn all these things. And I remember someone said, I don't trust that guy. He has khakis on. With khakis. It was like a thing, but in the office, it's khakis on. You must know the rule, and it's all these hidden rules. How you wear your hair. You talked about the Crown Act, the handshake. 1, 2, 3, let go. Looking someone in the eye. Yeah, it's 3, right? You do more than 3, it's like you're desperate. If you do less, it's like it's questionable.
You don't care.
So you don't care about life.
The fish hand.
The fish hand.
So
yeah, that's the other.
I've had people say that they would not hire someone if they had, and I didn't even know they called it the fish. And you know what it was? I thought it was a male thing, but it wasn't. It was a bunch of people identify being a woman and say if a person, man or woman, gives it that, I mean, I had someone say that meant that they didn't have a good upbringing.
Interesting.
You're talking about
as I have been binge watching Bridgerton lately, the reason where that came from is women would give you their hand to like kiss it or whatever.
Yes,
like,
thank you.
Something that's on TikTok is very demure, right? It's very dainty,
vanilla, whatever that is. Sorry, go on.
So, and then nobody said. I was actually an ex of mine. May he not listen to this. Actually chastised me for the way that I shake hands because he was a Mason and there was like this secret thing they did as Masons and I had no idea. I just have a very firm, nice handshake. And he was like, you cannot do that because it's this, that, and the third. And I was like, I'm not a part of this institution,
but
this
that's
organization.
The rules. Those are the rules.
Well, what I
that's
do
the
know
rules.
is that my handshake has opened many a door for me as a woman who is not giving you the fish hand. Like I'm shaking your hand with some sort of assertiveness. Mm-hmm. And he was like, all because of this secret society he was a part of. He was like, well, these are the rules of this society. I was like, well, y'all don't let me in. So it does not apply to me in this context. And it was wild. I thought he'd be impressed because like, oh, you don't do the little girl fish hand. And now he's like, you can't shake hands like that.
One thing about the dainty handshake, I learned this in different countries. The more wealth you have, male or female, the lighter you shake the hand.
Interesting.
Keeping some rules.
And the problem is
that's a whole chat.
We're not adequately preparing our young people for that. In my role as an employability skills instructor, these are some of the things that I teach 18, 19, 20-year-olds about who are entering to the workforce. And like you say something to them like, don't text while you're on the floor, or make sure your uniform is neat, or like, don't wear, one of the examples was not wearing large earrings. I am a fan of a hoop earring. That is probably
Now, is your name in it?
staple.
It says Rachel. It says Rachel.
No, not this time. Back in the day, yes.
Michelle.
But I'm of a certain age now. But I was talking about hoop earrings, and the women looked at me kind of like, "Friend, now be for real." And I was like, "Well, first of all, it is a safety hazard in the industry that you are in, because it could get on somebody's clothes, somebody could pull it, something like that." But and again, it's one of these unspoken rules that it means something. And we've had this conversation again about like, well, who gets to decide what professional is, quote unquote, and who gets to make those determinations. And in the meantime, between time, how do we get employed until we have sorted all of that out? And how do we have those conversations with people who nobody's told them, yeah, you don't. I received an email from a young person. It was just one run-on sentence, and the way I read it was not the way she intended it. So it said something along the lines of like, "Hi, how are you? Still struggling with my login?" And I read it as, "Hi, how are you? Still struggling with my login?"
Oh.
And she said, "Hi, how are you? I am still struggling with my login."
Yeah.
But the first way I read it, and I immediately was like, that's me typing, folks. And I had to stop myself and just step away from it. Like, that is not what she meant. But she just didn't know that you have to put punctuation in. And part of that etiquette, that professional etiquette, right? Like, she didn't know.
She didn't know, yeah.
And so now you have the need for like this type of role, because we know that there are certain ways you're expected to show up in a professional environment that not all people have access to explicitly, because they're not taught in school. So if it's not taught at your dinner table, then where do you get this information?
Yeah. Very
Mentorship.
true. Yes, mentorship. Yes, for sure. Yeah, I think I was going to ask you a little bit about mentorship, because I know that is something that's super important to you. Yeah, just talk to us about it.
So in the diversity, equity, inclusion world, there's the equity part, and equity is a hard thing. I had someone say the other day, it's like equity is like the value you have in your home. I was like, that's not what we're talking about, Mike. Yeah. We'll get back to you on that one, but equity is still hard because it really requires you to give a person a resource, and that resource is not always money. It could be time, it could be direction, it could be guidance. And so for me, in my personal journey, at this point, a lot of people can access college, right? They can access certificates and training programs, as you mentioned, but the equity in mentorship is hard for people to access, because number one, I get this question all the time: where do I find a mentor? And I didn't know I needed a mentor. Yeah. Where do I find a mentor? I think I have a mentor, but I haven't seen him in a year. Really? And there's all these conversations around it, and so. But when you start to look at people who are in the C-suite, who are at a different level in the organization, most of them will say, and all of them have, but most of them will acknowledge that they've received some type of formal mentoring, or mentoring from family members, or from their first employee, their first employer. And so mentorship is what I say. A mentor is a person who shines the light on opportunities that you can't see for yourself. Mm-hmm. Shine the light on stairs that will take you to the next level. And yeah, I'm like extremely passionate about it. I don't believe that. I shouldn't say I don't believe. I think it's really challenging where you want to get to in life, definitely in your career, if you don't have some type of informal or formal mentorship. Formal mentorship, being very conscious about it, will get you there faster. But of course, if you have people who come in your life to support you, you can eventually get there. So yes, I'm super passionate about it.
Yeah.
Well, and of all backgrounds too.
Sure, both of these. What do you think about the idea of having an assigned mentor? Like in some organizations, they will place someone with you or pair some with you.
Oh, no. I think you need to build some type of rapport. It's just like someone you've never met, and they just come in. And it's like,
I had never met this person. Nope.
I think you're daddy now, right?
I was not expecting that. Okay.
You know, so no, seriously though, I think when you it is kind of like that, right? It's like this is going to be your guide. They know nothing about you, you know nothing about them. Have they been trained? Have you been trained? It could be really, unfortunately messy, and those relationships tend to lead in unsuccessful outcomes for the mentor, and frustration for both the mentee and the mentor. I said unsuccessful outcomes for the mentee, and can be very frustrating for both. So I don't agree with that. I think you should, within your organization, you should first start with a mentorship culture. So, because most organizations either don't have the resources, whether it's the time, the infrastructure, the people who want to be mentors, training for the mentors. They don't have a line item in their budget for it. Like it takes resources to create a mentorship program, a successful one that you can look at and measure, and then are not going to be performative, right? It's just going to be like, we did this to check the box. Yeah. And no one's ever met with their mentor, like except for the first day at the opening event. So I think that mentorship culture is the first step, that we believe in mentoring, and we mentor throughout the office, and it's a part of, and it needs to start from leadership down. So leaders need to identify people and make sure they're reaching out and encouraging other people at different levels of the organization to reach out to other people. So everyone's getting this experience to say, oh, I came in and I wanted to learn about this project because I'm working on a new international program. And, oh, Mike helped me with that. Oh, Mike helped you. Mike helped me too as well. And it's like, oh, let me help you. Before you know it, everyone's kind of sharing and giving information. Now, of course, when your organizations become larger, it can be more challenging. And that's when you need some type of codified plan or program to operationalize it.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate you talking about the fact that training is needed here. To just say, here you go, you're going to be a mentor now. First of all, like that more than just frustration, like that, Rachel, more than just frustration, that could be bad outcome if you could send them the wrong way, like totally sour them even on the organization itself, or just whatever that situation is. But I just think like how stressful it might be to the person who's supposed to be the mentor themselves if they don't know what they're doing, or how they feel like, oh gosh, I have this responsibility. I don't know what I'm doing here.
If you don't know how to take control, it feels like this person is taking the ship down, and that's probably how mentoring feels. And
not prepared, yeah.
It's like a horrible date, right? Like, what are we going to talk about? Like, what do we do here?
You're probably so right. Like, that's true. You're both sitting there like, we're both here. We said we would meet.
So how's the weather? What school did you? Oh, and they're just waiting for the time. Well, that's it for today. Call me never.
Man.
It's unfortunate, but it happens. And so I've met people who've gone through those mentorship programs, and they don't believe in mentoring because they say, I've done it and it didn't work. The company didn't support it, or mentors don't know how to mentor, or they were excluded. I mentored a young African-American woman. I remember we were at a conference and we were talking about getting lunch. And that there was a power differential that I didn't recognize because I was in my glory. I'm a mentor. I'm doing great. I'm helping this person with their life and all these different things. And I had a blind spot that this was a young woman, and I'm a man. Everyone, but we're both, would identify with being African American. And until this other older woman came in, I was talking about getting lunch, and I was like, why is she acting so sheepish? And it was because she didn't know who was going to pay for it. Because I didn't give her any rules or anything. And then there was this whole thing. And when there was only 2 guys there, and it was like 8 women, and it was an older African American woman who came over, who she can see obviously I respected because she would joke with me, and you could just tell she was the senior there. And it wasn't until she said, you know what, I don't think your intern, she said this in front of the intern though, your intern doesn't feel psychologically safe with you. I was like, are you kidding? I said, no, you can't. No, I'm just CJ. I'm a mentor. And I looked over, and the mentor, what she said. Oh, wow.
Listen to the lady. That is interesting.
Yeah.
Right. Like I didn't have words. And
Yeah.
we talked for about an hour after that about internship, and then we got to the point where she said, and another thing, it was like going on and on.
Oh.
It's like, and another thing, she's like, I don't like being called an intern because I'm actually doing consultant work. And if you keep calling me an intern, and I put that on my resume, then people are only going to want to hire me because I've only had internship. I should be a consultant. I was like, well, I'm not going to pay you more, but yeah, I'll give you the consultant. So she became a consultant. All we did was change her title. That led to her getting her dream job. And now I talk to her every quarter, just like the update. But if that person wasn't there to create psychological safety because of the gender difference and the power difference, I would have never known. I would have been going off and say, I'm a mentor. We're both people of color. We should understand that, but I'm missing something. And that could fail when it comes to mentoring.
Yeah. No, that's a very powerful example. I think there's probably a lot of folks who wouldn't consider something like that. So, no, absolutely. Wow. Well, we are kind of coming up on the hour here. I just wanted to open it up and ask you, CJ, if there's anything, that you think our listeners would appreciate knowing, or something else you'd like to share that maybe I didn't ask you specifically.
Well, there's so much. I think it's important to understand that as you expand your zip code story, you are pushing the edge of your envelope. And what that means is you are going to the edge of who you think you are, your story, and you are bringing to life the reality around you. And that can be uncomfortable. And you can feel alienated from a group that you are used to being around and sharing your life with as you rise through the ranks. Class migrants, you see that a lot, whether it's in people who have become successful. Like I follow some of the rappers, and as they become, they're still rappers, but they're now buying businesses and football teams and things of that nature. And you hear the stories. I had to change the people I hang around. It's very uncomfortable. So I would say get used to what we like to say, get comfortable with discomfort. And that's talking to different people from different backgrounds, going to do different things. We say there's three areas that you can focus on to expand your zip code story, which is meeting new people, going to different places, and trying new things. You don't have to jump out of airplane, but Rachel, you don't have to jump out of airplane.
Just your basic nouns.
Right. It helps because what happens is, and it's a challenging concept to understand. Those experiences allow you to have different conversations with different people from different backgrounds, which then which opens doors for you, which then puts you in a position that you might not have been able to reach just by yourself, just by your own accomplishments, even with your 4.0 GPA, right? So I'm bringing it all back around.
Sure is.
So I would say
you feel a little hurt though.
No, I want mine too, right? But I think that would be the main point of the book is to really, and the work around the zip code story really is to expand your zip code story, because it not only allows you to expand, to have a bigger story yourself, but it also allows you to empathize for people who have a different zip code story than you. So, for example, as you rise through the ranks, I've seen this in companies. People who are at the individual level, contributor level, will complain about managers. Middle managers will complain about the people at the individual contributor level and the C-suite. And then when you start rising through, you say, "Oh, I see it differently here now because I'm at a different elevation." And so, I guess the goal is to just continue to elevate in all things that you do.
I think that's so interesting. Rachel, what stood out for you today?
Yeah, there's a lot that I'm resonating with as, we go back into our mutual communities and do the service work that all of us do, and keeping these things in mind when you are interacting with folks, whether it be at work or in your communities, is that everybody has a story that we don't know. And we make a decision, like we talked about at the top of the hour, where it's like you look at somebody, make decisions about them based on how they're dressed, how they present age-wise, how they present racially, how they present as a certain gender. And then you begin to crystallize that when you really need to be more curious and inquisitive and ask more questions, so that you are not rooting your decision in your own bias, implicit or otherwise.
I like it, for sure. All right. Well, before we wrap, do you want to give any shout outs or tell listeners where they can find you and all the great stuff you're doing for folks?
Sure. So no, people can find me at well, let's say what's your zip code store, but it's not actually. So people can find me in two locations: the www.ascensionworldwide.com and also cjgrosstalks.com, and I'm also on LinkedIn as CJ Christopher CJ Gross. And you never know, I may be coming to a venue near you. I speak all over the country.
Yeah, I love it. And I'll link everything so folks can find you easy there too. Listen, I so
Thank you so
appreciate you.
much. I wanted to
Yeah,
say thank you for you.
absolutely. And thank you for spending this time with us. I've been a fan. I think that these are conversations that people haven't been having, but can definitely benefit from. So y'all first go buy the book. Like you have to buy the book, and then also these are some really great concepts that I hope that folks can just apply in their everyday, even if it isn't in the workplace. There's a lot here that we can think about. So appreciate you. Thanks for sharing
I
all this with
appreciate
us.
both of you as well. Thank you, Rafa. Thank you, Shawna.
Thank you.